Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and a massive welcome back to my dear old friend MFCSS. All that positivity generated from our incredible Demonland track watchers' pre-season training reports quickly dissipated as the Dockers slammed on 6 unanswered goals in the second term. But the D's rallied, they fought back, and I had to remind myself of that timeless footy adage. It's only a practice match if you lose. Joining me tonight is longtime Demonland veteran George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening to Ben Man. Good evening to all our listeners. Let's hope that there hasn't been too much wrist slashing in Demonland as a result of this practice match. Even Andy's apparently gone off his food and he hasn't eaten tonight. But we're here tonight to remind everybody that the real game doesn't start for another 2 weeks.
I don't know. It felt real to me. The pain felt real. Also joining us tonight is Bin Man, here to bring some much needed positivity and hopefully alleviate my concerns about the season ahead. Good evening, Bin Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonland Massive. I would say realism, not positivity. I mean, it was, it was an interesting watch. It's some of the comments on the Demonland post-game thread. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but there's some negativity there that I think is unwarranted, and there's very little comment on the 2 of the key things that need to be considered about that game. Is 1, it was a VFL standard ground down in Mandurah. 2, it was, by all accounts, 30 degrees plus for the entirety of the game. And 3, it was super windy. So, I think all of them, not to say that was a factor in it. Well, it was a factor in the result because we're such a terrible kicking side. And as I've banged on about a million times is, wind and open grounds that don't, have stands to protect from the wind are going to exacerbate poor kicking technique. And bottom line is we've got too many players with poor kicking technique still. So, but yeah, it was a good hit out and looking forward to getting into it.
All right, well, we will get into it shortly, but just a bit of housekeeping. Each week I invite our loyal listeners to support the podcast by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we really appreciate your feedback. And as a token of our gratitude, we give a well-deserved shout-out to those who take the time to share their reviews. And Ocean Grove writes, love it and welcome back. Look forward to this chat each week. No BS, just great Demons chat with like-minded tragics. And thank you for that one, OG. And Gorned But Not Begotten writes, the ultimate podcast for true Demon fans. As a long-time listener of the Demonland podcast, I can confidently say that this is the ultimate destination for any passionate Melbourne Demon supporter. Week in and week out, the team delivers an exceptional mix of insightful analysis, passionate discussion, and just the right amount of humour to keep things engaging. Just the right amount. Come on, mate. What sets the Demonland podcast apart is the depth of knowledge and the genuine love for the club that shines through in every episode. Whether it's dissecting the latest match, debating selection dilemmas, or discussing the club's future, these guys cover it all with a level of detail that you simply won't find anywhere else. The interaction with fans is another highlight. Reading out listener comments, responding to questions, and embracing the Demonland community makes it feel like a real supporter-driven experience. There's a camaraderie among the hosts and listeners that makes you feel like you're sitting around with mates, venting frustrations after a loss or celebrating a famous win together. Through the highs and lows, from the dark days to the ultimate glory of 2021, Demonland has been there providing a voice for the most passionate Melbourne supporters. If you love the Ds, this podcast is simply unmissable. 5 stars. Go Ds. Well, wow, that's a comprehensive review. I just love it. Thank you, Gorn But Not Begotten. Great name for a footy forum. Keep that.
Andy, just before you go on, mate, can I just highlight you've breaking into like a CP30 sort of static noise every now and again. I'm not sure if that's coming through the listeners, but it is here. Every,
well, I'm hoping
there's a little bit of R2D2 action.
I was telling it should be fine on the recording. Hopefully, I did have to do a factory reset of my mixer just before we went to air. and I wasn't factoring the time that would take. I don't know if that has anything to do with the robotic voice that you're hearing. It's very possible. I'm hoping that it does record okay. Through my earphones, I sound fine, but hopefully it's not too bad for you guys. I'm not stopping anything, so you're going to have to put up with R2-D2 or C-3PO or whichever sci-fi character for the rest of the show. And,
Well, the D's have had a factory reset.
Well, I don't know if that factory reset worked. I'm a bit C-3PO-ish for my liking. We'll get into that shortly, but keep that feedback coming. Not Big Man's feedback about my robotic voice. Simply leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we'll give you that shout-out on the show. If you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, and you want to leave feedback, ask a question, or share a comment for the show, you can do so under our weekly podcast post, or just slide into our DMs. And don't worry, we won't read out your full name on the air. You can download and listen to the Demonland podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, SoundCloud, or your favorite podcasting app. And in addition, you can also watch and listen to us on YouTube. Just search for the Demonland podcast to find our channel and subscribe. And if you want to connect with other passionate D's fans and you haven't checked out our forum, Demonland, head on over to demonland.com, sign up and join the conversation with fellow supporters from across Australia and around the world. It's completely free. And in addition to posting questions or comments for the show, you'll find endless discussions of all things Melbourne Demons. If you want to jump on the air tonight and have your say on any of the topics we're covering, give us a call at 03 9016 3666. That's 03 9016 3666. I'll answer, I'll put you on mute, I'll bring you on in when there's a break in the conversation. You can also call that number anytime during the week to leave us a message and we'll play it out on the show. If you're listening to us live, come join us in the chat room at demonland.com/podcast and be a part of the discussion in real time. And you can actually help us out by going to demonland.com/podcast and telling me or telling my co-host whether I do sound like R2-D2 or C-3PO or any other android through there. So, guys, if you can just have a look in there and just let me know if anyone is listening to us live and they can tell us. We do go live every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. So if you want to catch the show as it happens, head on over to demonland.com and tune in. I'll get into the match overview in a second. Haven't heard back from anyone on Demonland, so that's fine. Let's continue on. It was a game of mixed fortunes for the Demons, featuring the long-awaited return of Christian Petracca, a dominant midfield performance in terms of getting first use of the footy, and unfortunately a frustrating early injury as well as an infuriating day in front of goal. And we are getting Terence saying, Bin Man is right. How terrible is that? It's got to be my mixer that is the problem. I'm hoping that it records all right. It should record fine onto my computer. That's the hope anyway. Otherwise, it'll be a funny story you can tell all your friends one day. The biggest positive for the D's fans was the dynamic midfield duo of Christian Petracca and Clayton Oliver. In his first game back after a traumatic 2024 season, Petracca wasted no time making his presence felt, winning the first clearance of the game and finishing with a game-high 33 disposals and 12 score involvements. Oliver was just as electric, racking up 28 disposals, 11 clearances and 3 goals. The two stars combined for 20 clearances, showcasing their ability to take control of the game when given the opportunity. Their dominance was a major reason why Melbourne controlled much of the midfield battle, particularly in the second half. Despite winning clearances and forward entries, Melbourne's inaccuracy in front of goal was a killer. The final scoreline of 11-24 to 16-13 tells the story. Wastefulness cost the Demons dearly. The first quarter set the tone with Melbourne kicking 5 straight behinds despite strong attacking pressure. This theme continued throughout the match, with the team at one point repeating the sequence of 5 consecutive behinds twice more, with Van Rooyen out early due to a back spasm. Melbourne's forward line lacked structure and the absence of a focal point inside 50 was glaring. Stephen May and Jake Lever stood tall in defence, but the Demons struggled with turnovers coming out of the back line, conceding 3 goals from poor disposal in the first half. The wing experiment was exposed at times, with the Demons looking slow to transition compared to the Dockers, who moved the ball with pace and confidence. The second quarter proved decisive as Fremantle took full control with 5 unanswered goals. Melbourne's defensive systems, usually a strong suit, was dismantled in the heat and swirling breeze. With Van Rooyen's sideline, mature age recruit Aidan Johnson stepped in and showed flashes of potential. He competed well in the air and was rewarded with a late goal after missing a sitter early on, but whether he has done enough to secure a round 1 spot remains to be seen. Harvey Langford and Xavier Lindsay, Melbourne's first-round picks, had quieter games compared to last week but showed glimpses of their clean ball use. Harry Sharp and Daniel Turner were quiet but had some promising moments, with Turner slotting 2 goals late in the game. Cozzy Pickett was held back until the fourth quarter, and when he finally took the field, he racked up 9 possessions, showing how much he'll be missed during his 3-game suspension to start the season. The biggest concern coming out of the match was Jacob Van Rooyen's early exit due to a back spasm, and while the club remains hopeful he'll be fit for round 1 against GWS, the nature of the issue means his availability is uncertain. Max Gawn also copped some heavy knocks, including 2 knees to the back from Fremantle's Josh Tracy, but played out the game and looked set to lead the Ruck Brigade into this season opener. While the scoreboard wasn't in Melbourne's favour, there were some positives to take from the game. Particularly in the midfield, the Demons controlled clearances and generated enough opportunities, but must sharpen up their efficiency in front of goal. With Van Rooyen under an injury cloud, Simon Goodwin and his coaching staff may need to rethink their round 1 forward setup. The D's have 13 days until their round 1 match against the GWS Giants. Boys.
Very comprehensive, Andy. Very comprehensive. It was an interesting game to watch, wasn't it, for the first half, but it was more fun in the second half, that's for sure.
I think we'll discuss it when we get to the listeners' questions, but this was a practice match. You know, I put absolutely no credit to the score lines because both teams are practicing various outcomes and various trialling people in various positions. The score means nothing in the end. You know, you could argue Fremantle put the cue in the rack towards the end as well with the people they took off the ground. You know, the fact that Cozzy was only playing 1 quarter tells you that it's a practice game. So you've got to look at the individuals and how they slotted into the side and their roles that they're trying to discover. So, yeah, it's nothing to be worried about. If we'd won that game, I don't think my opinion would change in any way, shape or form.
No. I mean, we'll unpack it a little bit as we go, but I think the point I made about, or a couple of things about the heat, I don't think there's any coincidence that if you look at the top-rated players, I haven't seen I have seen the ratings. So the top-rating players during the game were all our senior players. Oliver was number 1, Track was number 2, Langdon was number 3. You know, so really hard conditions to play in, and just on practice. And again, we'll unpack this a little bit as we go, but it was really noticeable that Goody was practicing setups and systems, and we were doing things that, you know, in particular that chipping around and controlling the ball. We were doing that at times last year, so I was really fascinated with some of that because, you know, that I think that's important to sort of take into the context because we weren't playing to win. We were playing to practice. So I think, as you say, George, practice is the key word. So there was lots of, you know, the setup structures, but in particular, you know, again, we'll talk about it as we go, but I was really fascinated by that ploy to kick it around and hold possession and keep it off them. And I've got a theory as to what that was about, but we'll talk about that a bit later.
Well, hopefully I fixed up the mic issue. It was the wrong mic was selected, the wrong type of mic in the mixer was selected. So I hope it recorded all right. If not, that'll be funny. I possibly
it just failed again, Andy.
I know. This it's pre-season, guys.
Yeah, pre-season.
What do I get, a mulligan, a do-over?
Yeah, you're dancing with your sisters.
That's right. So come round 1 in 2 weeks' time, I'll be back to my regular self. But we'll see. We've got Bin Man. Your stats files is back for 2025. You tell me that there's a new format, and Bin Man has assured me he's going to keep it under 10 minutes. So all those who complain that the show is too long, start your clocks right now, and you know who's to blame if this show goes over. So take it away, Bin Man.
That's right, Andy. So
I'm starting my clock.
done my pre-season review. I've looked at all the feedback. I've taken on board the Pearl's wisdom. And so, I'm going to try and be, less sort of stat heavy, but I flagged this last year and I'm going to run with it this year for a couple of reasons. So instead of the red and blue print, I'm going to go with what I did last year, which is, hold on, Andy, I've just got a phone call coming in. I'll just turn it off.
Is this a bit?
Hold on. Sorry about that. That was just turning this phone call. The good, the bad, and the ugly, and the bizarre. That's going to be my stats structure this year. When I get clearance for that, I'll make that my stinger. So
you could have asked me to do it, and it would have sounded a lot better.
So anyway, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So that's going to be the structure, partly because I want to tighten it up. 2, I've heard the feedback. And 3, I don't think, I'm really curious about how Goody's game plan will evolve this year. And, I've talked about this a lot, but I really reckon Goody's underestimated. His tactical nous is really underestimated. He has done a lot of innovative things in his time as senior coach. And I wonder whether we'll see a bit more of that this year. So I think that kicking round was a good example. So, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the curious or bizarre is going to be the structure. So, good. Let's start off with the good. There's a sort of fair bit of negativity, I reckon, about this game on Demonland. So, maybe that's not surprising, but it surprises me a little. Starting off with the good, 35 scoring shots. 35 scoring shots is going to win you a lot of games of footy. That's an impressive outing. So 11-24, quite remarkable. So the other part of the good of that is what, is kicking 10 goals in the second half. So we only had 1 goal at a half time. So we ended up kicking 10 second half goals. And again, that's going to win you lots of games of footy. One of the really good things that Goody would have been thrilled about, I reckon, was the contested possessions, 127, 112, so up 15 against a team that I think I'm right in saying was number 1 for contested possessions last year. It might be clearances, though. Perhaps they were 4th for contested possessions and number 1 for clearances. I think that's it. So we beat them for clearances, and of course we beat them for another good stat for us was we beat them for clearances. The AFL website is hopeless for stats. It's really, it's hopeless. Given AFL have got some sort of interest apparently in champion data. It's so basic, it's ridiculous. So, but the clearances were 45-27. That will please a lot of people who are worried about our our clearance ability, and how could it be so poor with so many good players? Well, it was dynamite when you put in Petracca and Viney and Clary. And Clary looked in fantastic, Nick, and he was our best player on the ground. Arguably, certainly, he was our highest rated player. With clearances, again, the key, it's a bit of a nothing stat. It's really, to a large degree, it's similar to hit-outs. So it doesn't, the raw number of clearances doesn't tell you anything about the outcome or the quality of those clearances. It's not on the AFL stats, and Wheelo hasn't got the stats for this game yet. Well, he won't have them for the preseason. So I'm not sure what the scores from clearances were. That's the key stat, scores from clearance. But still, it was an impressive effort. And at one stage in the third quarter, it was 10 clearances to, I think it was 10 clearances to 1 at one point. So that's terrific. We had another thing that Goody would have been thrilled about. With 2 minutes to go before three-quarter time, we had 18 forward half turnovers. That's really, a huge stat for clubs. They talked about it in the coverage that's something Freo would need to get better at. But we were smashing them in that. I don't know what Freo were, but we were well and truly on top in terms of forward half turnovers. We had 45 to 27 clearances for the total match, as I said. Another positive last quarter, regardless of whether they put the Q in the rack, 5 goals, 9. A real positive for me in that is that we ran the game out. So did they. They look like they ran it out pretty well, but we did kick, I think I'm right in saying it was 5 goals, 9 in the last quarter, wasn't it? Is that right? So 14 scoring shots in the last quarter. We actually were relatively efficient inside. So it was another good 58.7 to their 57.8. So we were slightly more efficient when we did go inside 50. What's important about that stat is that people might go, hold on, that's a bit wacky, but that's efficiency in terms of scoring shots. So you take out all our missed goals and, as again, we win that game. I mean, how often have we talked about, our kicking? So let's go to that. Just a couple of other good things. As I said, one of the really fantastic things was Clary's game statistically and just, the eye test and statistically. Our 2 highest rated players on the ground in AFL rating and in the fantasy points. Actually, May was really high in the fantasy points, but in the AFL rating, the 2 highest players were number 1 was Clary and number 2 was Petracca. That is, an impressive performance from both of them. It was fantastic to see Clary kick goals. We've talked about this not so much last year. We just wanted him playing footy last year, but previous years is if he could kick goals and really interestingly, he played forward a little bit in that second half. So resting forward. If he can kick goals, add that to a string to his bow, it just takes him to, he's already rarefied air. And that jink to the left to open up, that showed to me where he kicked that goal on his left foot, showed to me a player who is getting back towards his best. It'll be like having a brand new recruit. So that was massive. He also had 2 tackles inside 50, which was fantastic. And a shout out to Fritter, who also had 2 tackles inside 50. If Fritter, there's no coincidence, Fritter's highest number of goals in a season was 21, also coincided with his most number of tackles. His second highest goal kicking was 22, and that was also, I think it was his second highest tackle count. So he's up and about, tackling, providing pressure. He is real cream on top of that cake. The bad, 1 goal at half time is... Sorry,
did you say Fritch's highest goals a year was 22?
21.
He's kicked 59 goals, 55 goals.
Wasn't it? How much was it in 21?
In 21, he kicked 59 goals.
Yeah. That's what I said, isn't it? So that was his highest he's kicked.
I thought you said 21 goals. Sorry.
No. In 21.
Oh, in 21.
The most he's kicked in a season is 59.
Okay, you were saying the year. Okay, sorry. I thought you were... Anyway, continue.
Now you're padding out my time. Hold on, what time did I start? Now I'm under pressure.
All right, you get I'll give you an extra minute.
So bad. There were some bad things, and the obvious one, really, you could almost argue ugly, is our kicking for goals. Again, I know it was windy. I thought of you, George, when Billing was spraying those kicks. He had a good game, Billings, and
hope he doesn't have a bad one.
Right, well,
we got a question about that.
But he was excellent outside. He's kicking for goals. But, Fritter, please don't pass to Billings when you've got a shot on goal, please. Come on.
You know what? I think that was a confidence thing as well, because I think Fritch had missed a couple and he just wanted to give it off 100%.
Yeah, so... But that accuracy, how many points was it in the end? It was 24 points.
24.
Yes, it was windy, but, their accuracy, just another game we've lost where we would have won if we kicked accurate, almost no doubt in my mind, particularly in that first quarter. That was when we really sort of muddled our chances. I'd put this in the bad, ugly almost, is... with 4 minutes to go to 3-quarter time, Freo had 28 inside 50s and had scored 19 times. That is just nuts. And then it evened out actually in that last quarter. They fell away. But as I say, with 4 minutes to go in the third quarter, they'd scored 19 times from their 28 entries. So we dominated a lot of the territory in that game. We'd been on top. I think it's a real challenge for us is that, we're changing from being the best defensive side for a long time over a 4 or 5 year period. We're changing the system. I think it's going to be a work in progress. But I have to say, we're going to have to be prepared if we want to play a different style where we're pressing up higher and we're looking to move the ball quickly. We will give up more goals. It's just a fact. It's just the natural outcome manifestation of that. Of that model, really. But I'm curious about that holding the ball and kicking it around. I suspect what Goody's idea was, and so that was reflected in the uncontested disposals. We had, 236 kicks to 211, 161 handballs to 147. So we had a heap more possessions than them, and a lot of those possessions were those moving it around. I suspect that was something that Goody did for tactical reasons, not wanting to show all of the cards in this game. This wasn't a full practice hit out. I think George is bang on. It was a practice game, and I don't think he showed a lot of his cards. And I wonder whether their advantage, Freo's advantage over us, is that their leg speed, and continues to be a challenge for us, I think. And I wonder whether it was partly an opportunity to practice mitigating that for when we play them in the season. If we've got the ball and chipping it around, they haven't got the ball and they can't, they take advantage of, because they like to do that too, but to create the spread. It's really interesting. That game, I thought Simpson was really interesting to listen to in the commentary box. And I thought it was curious him talking about that style, because of course that's what West Coast did. That was basically the Simpson model, was chipping around until you could find a pathway up the field. But we can't be giving away that sort of percentage. That was really ugly. Defensively, I thought there were some struggles, really, and again, ugly, bad/ugly, is that it's the opposition small forwards that really hurt us, that continue to hurt us, did in this game. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I suspect a big chunk of their goals were kicked by the Walders and, the smaller players. So, it continues to be a big problem. Just flipping back to good, you mentioned, Andy, that, we struggled up forward, but that's, well, one, I don't think that's the case. We had 35 scoring shots that is a lot of scoring shots. We actually had, marks inside 50, 14 marks to they only had 8 marks inside 50. So to our 14, that shows a couple of things. One, it showed our ball movement, created some space, and we got the ball and we kicked well, and it was up to advantage a couple of times. Viney kicked one to Turner advantage, which was brilliant. And my favourite kick of the day was Lindsay's kick that set up the screamer that Sparrow took. So I think that was some of that kicking was really good, but 14 marks inside 50, there were times last year where we only had 4 or 5 marks inside 50. So that was a real positive. I mentioned a real positive was our highest rated players were Oliver and Track. A negative, I'm not sure it fits with the ugly, but definitely bad, is Chandler only had 3 possessions. So, whilst we struggle to defend small forwards, I think we've also got a challenge, haven't we, I think, with small forwards ourselves. Because he's going to play as basically mid who rests forward, Chandler is the player who's going to have to be up forward. Now, we don't have the AFL doesn't have the pressure numbers, so his key indicator would be the pressure he applies. But so I don't really know what that pressure was, but he only had 2 tackles, only one of which was inside 50. And, the ball hit the deck and he wasn't able to score any goals. So it's a challenge for us. And I'm not quite sure what the answer is. Maybe Mentha will get a look at some say, I don't know. But Chandler, it's his position at the moment. It wasn't a fantastic match by him. And the other ugly one was, or wasn't really statistic, but just, bizarre really was, so my bizarre stat is you can't have many games where your full forward goes off in the first 30 seconds. And fingers crossed it's okay. But after seeing Bontempelli come off and basically tell boundary rider, yeah, no worries, I'm good. And next thing you know, he's off for 6 weeks minimum. Until I see JVR back out on the training track or selected in round one, I won't not worry.
It's my concern as well, because I saw it twice on the weekend of 2 players who sort of he'll be right, and then 6 to 8 weeks.
So that's the good, bad, the ugly. Just quickly, I just wanted to highlight one more thing that about the performances of Clary and Track, and it's like, to have players of that quality playing for us is something that we should never take for granted. Clearances, Claz had 11 clearances. Petracca was next on the ground with 9. Jack Viney was a ways back at 4. They were both incredible for the entire game. The score involvements is something that's really important. I think it's a really key stat. This was our top 3 score involvements. Petracca had 12 score involvements, which is just phenomenal in a game of footy. Max Gawn was second. He had 10 score involvements. So score involvement means anywhere that you're in number of scoring chains where a player was involved with either a disposal, hit out to advantage, kick in or knock on. If a player has 2 disposal in the same scoring chain, they are credited with only 1 score involvement. So Track had 12 score involvements. Maxi was next with 10, and Claz was third with 9. Then we Sparrow with 8, Langdon with 8, Viney with 7, Rivers with 6. So it really just demonstrates too how, as I said before, it was a day that favoured senior players of, multiple 6, 7 pre-seasons under their belt. No good for the kids in those sorts of conditions. And similarly, the other one that's really, really important in any model and any method is inside 50s. Track had 10 inside 50s, Clary had 9 inside 50s, and Ed Langdon had 7 inside 50s. Really, really impressive numbers. And that's it, Andy. How did I go? Did you time me?
Yeah, I think you were about nearly 20 minutes.
Oh, rubbish. No way.
I don't know. It wasn't timing.
All right.
I had a loose, I had too many things going on in my head.
It's pre-season.
Yeah, pre-season. We'll tighten it up in round 1. Well, let's get straight into the listener questions. Pingu says, welcome back, guys. It was a nice surprise to see the podcast pop up in my feed last week. Looking forward to a great year of podcasting ahead. We had more possessions, plus 39, more marks, plus 6, more shots on goal, plus 6, equal tackles, more inside 50s, plus 18, more hit-outs, plus 22, more clearances, plus 18. But we lost by 19, and I felt it should have been much more. Besides the first 8 minutes of the first quarter and most of the third, I thought we were either smashed or absolutely exposed. Surely the difference wasn't just missed shots. Monocular adds, Thanks as always for your hard work, diligence and good humour. Welcome back. I didn't get in time to welcome you back last week. Unfortunately, I couldn't watch the whole match, and I realised that stats aren't the be-all and end-all, but yet again, we dominated many key stats, yet couldn't kick a winning score. All right, well, we've heard from Binman already, so let's get George's take on winning in the key stats but losing the match. Was it just our inaccuracy, or was it more than that, or are you just going to put it down to being a practice match, George?
Can you turn Binman's audio off, please?
Okay,
if that's all right.
Because
he's going to hear things he doesn't want to hear.
Okay.
I'm muted already. You can't mute. Oh, all right.
Stay muted. You can talk after George speaks. Don't interrupt.
I am not a fan of AFL stats by any stretch of the imagination. I find them very crude. Simply because there's now unfortunately an industry that's been built up around trying to provide statistics for things that don't need statistics, compared to, for example, baseball, completely different game. Yeah, but stats in baseball are pretty straightforward. You hit home runs or you don't, how many times you go to bat, how many catches you make. But the AFL industry is trying to create statistics for which just produce numbers but don't have any real effective measure of quality in them. They're trying desperately when they come up with things like disposal in efficiency, and when they come up with things like pressure points and all that sort of rubbish. I can provide pressure points. I can tackle someone, but it won't be effective. I can chase after someone, but it won't be effective. But they get the same numbers that come out in terms of statistics. Statistics are the numbers that are the result of the actions that occur on the field. So, yeah, that's why I'm not a fan of them at all. When it comes down to straight numbers, that's fines, kicks and handballs. They still don't measure the effective kicks. They still don't measure the effective handballs. A handball in the middle when you're surrounded by 6 people is not the same as a handball in the back line that goes 20 or 30 metres, but we put the same numbers in there. So I don't put a great deal of credit to statistics as they stand in the AFL systems. Like I said, there's a whole industry designed to try and find a reason for existing, unfortunately, and people have grabbed it with 2 hands. In this game, it's a practice match. I'll keep reminding you, it's a practice chance. It was a chance to show the game plan. It was a chance to practice the game plan. You can't practice a game plan against your own players because everybody knows what the game plan is. So this was the opportunity to try it against somebody else. Somebody else is trying it against us. You could see that right from the very start. We didn't have T-Mac or Petty playing in the game. Why? Because we probably wanted to see what Adams and we wanted to see what Howes could do. We know exactly what we're going to get out of T-Mac. We know exactly what we're going to get out of Petty. But how does Howes and Adams work in with May and Lever and the rest of the back line? This is the only opportunity that we're going to have to see that, because they'll probably be finishing playing down at Casey and not playing in a zone defence type situation like they will be if they're up in the seniors. We played AJ instead of Campbell. So the question that we had last week, what's better, a ruck who can play forward or do we play a forward who can ruck? This was the opportunity for us to do that sort of thing. That's why it's a practice game. There was no Cozzy. We don't need him in the first 3 games to be, or he's not available.
Well, we do need him.
Yeah, we need him. But this was the opportunity to find out what we can do without him. That's why we were practicing. That's why, for example, I didn't see a great deal of midfield, certainly centre bounce time spent with Sparrow and also Rivers, because they were trying other options. We were trying Langdon in the middle instead. This was all practice. How do you see how well Harvey Langford's going to play? You give him a run. You don't need to run him into the ground, especially in 30 plus degrees temperature. But this was the opportunity to try him in the middle when we could. We tried different wingers with Langdon playing in the middle. We had the opportunity to see what Sharp was like. We were seeing what Windsor was like. So Billings as well. Who's the best one? This was the opportunity. We had all these things working. So I just can't take the stats that produce from a game where both sides are trying things out. They become meaningless in the end, and I think the score in the end is also just as equally meaningless.
B-Man, you wanted to respond?
Well, not in. I mean, just suffice to say, I just completely disagree, George. I mean, the reality is it's not driven. That's my frustration. It is not driven by the media. The stats is every single champion data stat and data point has been driven by the clubs. Champion data came into existence because of the clubs. We're getting rubbish data from having individual statisticians. And the champion data filled a vacuum, which was professional football clubs saying, we want the data. We need the information. We need the stats. And my frustration is the football world hasn't caught up with that. It's like ridiculous. That's the AFL, of course. Clearances by themselves and hit-outs, they're ridiculous. There's no depth to them, which is why Willow's stats, which are mainly champion data. So champion data generate the most valuable stat, and The point about it is that you don't have one stat to tell a story. You have multiple stats. And I know for a fact that the coaches, I mean, you could hear Simpson talking about it. He knew the numbers straight away. He said, I haven't got the pressure numbers in front of me. And that's a good example. The pressure number was created by the clubs saying, we need a measure. We need an ability in game. That as I've said multiple times, they have that information. The players sit. The screen is in front of them, and that information is on the screen. Their pressure rating right through the game. They have a statistician who sits either up with the coach in the coaching box, or if the coach is down on the ground, whose full-time job is providing stats through the week to each of the players and to each of the line coach, and on match day feeding stats all the match to each of the line coaches and to the senior coach. So it's just a nonsense, really, from my perspective, that that they're not valuable and they're not, the industry want them. What's frustrating is that we don't have access to good data. We don't have access to good stats, and the lack of ability to analyze it. Of course, stats in of themselves aren't, you need to look at multiple things and they only tell part of the story, but that's why coaches are so desperate for them. That's why at halftime they'll interview Goody and he will say 4 or 5 key stats. You'll know them because he's looking at that data all through the match. So, we've moved a long way past 1979 when Barassi came to North Melbourne from North Melbourne, or 1981, and said, we need to improve our stats because we need to move into the modern era. So I disagree, but it's a whole different conversation.
I think maybe, I don't want to put words into George's mouth, but I think what George was saying was stats like, just comparing clearances, being +6 in clearances. Those individual stats on their own probably don't tell a story, but if you have stats like that pressure rating, that can tell more of a story than just us having 6 more clearances.
Well, yeah, of course. In of themselves, stat doesn't tell anything. You need to triangulate it. You need to see. That's what I meant before with, it's not about the number of clearances. It's about, that's why scores from clearances is an outcome stat. You can tell how successful your clearances have been by how often you score from them.
So it's not how big your stats are, it's how you use it. All right, point taken. All right, Radish D writes, reading some of the game day thread posts on Demonland, and the early criticism of the game plan is already concerning, especially since I didn't see the game myself. That's the second person who said they didn't see the game. Does this game plan actually suit the players we have? How long do you think it will take to determine whether it's viable? Are we heading down the same path as last year, persisting with a game plan that doesn't align with our strengths and weaknesses, only to abandon it midway through the season again? GS 1905 adds, the blueprint for a back half transition and turnover game has become the primary weapon for most teams in the modern game. Our vulnerability against sides like Fremantle, Collingwood, Hawthorn and Geelong stems largely from how we turn the ball over in our forward half. Is our issue really forward 50 pressure, or does it have more to do with our slow ball movement and imprecise kicking? Despite winning contested possession and clearances yesterday, I wondered whether that even mattered to Longmuir. Was he willing to concede stoppages knowing he could expose us on the outside? While I don't have the stats, it felt like we frequently turned the ball over post-clearance, allowing Freo's midfielders to set up in a more aggressive positions. This gave them more time and space when transitioning into their forward 50, whereas we often delivered the ball into a heavily flooded attack. I'd like to see us refine our structure and set up across the ground. Too often we seem drawn into the contest, leaving us outnumbered on the outside. Now, B-Man, there's a lot to unpack here, and you're a resident game plan expert. Radish D raises a fair point. Does this game plan actually suit the players we have? It feels like we've been asking this question for a while now. Are we once again forcing a system that doesn't maximise our strength, only to realise too late that it isn't working? And if so, how many rounds do we give it before any adjustments are made? GS 1905 touched on something that we've seen time and time again. That's our vulnerability in transition. It's no secret that the modern game is built around quick ball movement and forcing turnovers in the back half. Teams often capitalise on our inefficiency going inside 50. So Is it a forward 50 pressure issue, or is it the way we move the ball, the winning clearances and contested ball? It's great, but if we're turning over post clearances, allowing teams to set up offensively, then those wins, whilst not meaningless, they're certainly wasted. What do you think of the game plan?
One of the things that's where stats art can be useful is to fix up a sort of confirmation bias. Because as I said, we're in fact with 4 minutes to go, just before 3/4 time, we had 18 forward half turnovers. And as Simpson said in the commentary box, that's what Freo weren't doing particularly well. And as he said, front half turnovers are gold, and we had 18 of them with a full quarter to go. So our pressure was fantastic for periods. We had 35 scoring shots, so that's indication that a lot went right. If we'd 24, 11-24, if we'd kicked 18, 17, for instance, we win that game by 50 points. We did a lot right. My concern with the transition game is not us doing it. It's how can we improve our defence on the way back? Speed is a really critical issue because if you press up high, what was really interesting about this game, there was a couple of really interesting things that were different to the North game. One, in the North game, we pressed up really high. Our defensive line pressed and squeezed the ground up, hugely. We didn't in this game. We looked like we went the opposite, and we were stretching the ground ourselves. And that's why I think I wouldn't put too much stock in this being an example of how we're thinking of playing. I've got a feeling that Goody was playing some sort of tactical ducks and drakes with that chipping around, because that's a completely new thing. He did that a couple of times last year, but it was more about, I think, saving our, not running out of gas. He did that in the first quarter. We started doing it. And I think it was, my guess would be, at least part of it was to practice that for controlling the tempo and to take away one of Freo's strengths over us, which is their leg speed. Do we have the transition game? We definitely want to be playing that, but maybe Goody's I'd be really curious to see where he goes, because Goody will, this is not just Goody. McRae's the same. All of the coaches, Fagan, come finals, is the contest is still king. You still got to win contests. So do we have the players? We've now got bulls that, we had Track yesterday and Oliver yesterday stepping through tackles. Sparrow looking $1 million strong and strong in the contest. We've got Langford, who's 191 centimetres, and maybe Toiler looking big. We've got some big boys. So we've got those bulls. So we're looking to have contests. The clearances were interesting. They said again on the call, Simpson was quick to point this out, that Longmuir brought up people to the forwards up to the clearances to try and get back. That was his effort to try and address the smashing they were getting. So I don't know. I disagree with the idea that they were allowing it, because they brought an extra to the contest to try and wrest the clearances back into their favour. I thought tactically there were some really interesting things. Do we have the players? The key question for me, the key weaknesses, from my perspective for Melbourne, our lack of a really quality small defender who can pick up the opposition small crummer. And that was really evident yesterday with no McVee, because McVee was a player, Judd's been the player who's picked up the Camerons, or, the opposite, a player like Walters, he could go across and cover. That was really evident. But also, as I said before, we need some small forwards up there, but it still comes around to the kicking. So it was turnovers, so many poor kicks. There were some poor handballs. If you look at Bowie's numbers, he's actually had a pretty good game in a lot of respects, but it was really unlike him. Coaches must hate those sort of hack kicks out of defence. He did it 3 times and it landed straight, went straight back to a Freo, and they scored at least 2 goals from Bowie turnovers. Our kicking still is going to, even our best players brilliant kicks. I still think that's an issue for us with the transition game. I really think that Goody is, of course we want to move the ball quicker. It's a watch and see. I think it will not shock me at all if he's looking at some tactical innovations to implement that, certainly that kicking. The other one, as I talked about this at the beginning of in the preseason before last season, and I talked about it again last week in the podcast, and it was really noticeable in this match, was our long handballs forward. We're looking to handball 20 metres forward, 30, really long handballs. A couple of them came unstuck, but again, George's point's the critical one is it was a practice game and we were practicing. And I know I watched all of the other community cup games and a lot of those teams were also employing similar sort of strategies of handballs long out of the contest. It's an interesting one. It's almost like kicking for territory, still getting it forward. It worries me, that model, because I think handball chains will break down eventually, but it's definitely something. So the key tactical innovations from that game were the long handballs, the chipping it around. And as I said, we didn't press up at all. We hardly pressed up. So the ground was really wide. It was almost as if we were inviting. Maybe that was our effort to mitigate Freo's ability to move it down the ground easily. I wouldn't read too much into this game at all from a tactical perspective. And certainly I wouldn't be writing us off saying, well, we can't play that model.
Before you go, we did have a caller called through. Call back if you are listening live. All right, go, George.
Yes, similarly agree with what Binman was saying. I think the interesting things concerning the game plan in this was the long handball that Binman was talking about. Watching other practice games, a lot of teams are using the third player running past to move the ball quickly. But
we did a few times in that last quarter.
Yeah, but we were dramatically different compared to a Port Adelaide, a Sydney, the Suns. We were using it, and it was
like a short kicker.
Yeah, it was almost every player was told to do it, even though a lot of the circumstances weren't justified in using it. I would tell the mids immediately, for example, do not handball it forward when there's 6 players around you. You're not going to get a decent handball, and you're probably going to, as we did, pass it to the opposition players on a number of occasions. The other thing that interested me was at times we reverted to the kick it down the line to Max ones, and I didn't like that particularly because Max got absolutely smashed time and time again, and Fremantle certainly knew how to smash him. There's what was the other one in terms of game plan? It'll come to me later. But yeah, there were so many things being tried. As Binman's point about chipping it around. I thought that was an in-game practice, simulation of we're 2 points up, the opposition have just kicked a point. What are we going to do? Yeah, we practice holding the ball for as long as we possibly could against a team that was trying to press up, of course. But that's exactly what we've been talking about. This was a practice game. We were practicing it. Fremantle were trying out other things. It wasn't unexpected what we were starting to see, but I think we're doing something completely different from other sides that I've seen with the forward handball. Like I said, most of the other teams that I saw over the weekend, the last week, are using the third player running past to generate the forward movement. Collingwood certainly used that technique, but I think we're trying something very different here.
And I've got visions already of being at the MCG and people going off like, just kick it long, don't handball it long. And it's worth noting as we tried this in the preseason, as I said, in the 24 preseason. So those long handballs into space. Clary did one that didn't come off, but he must have handballed it like 40 metres. I think it was to track, or like maybe not 40, at least 20 metres. It was a thumping handball and we turned it over in the middle of the ground. But when it comes off, that player's away to the races. They're off into space. And the other thing, just in terms of Freo's ability, there's a big watch on our defensive thing, how well a zone defence holds up against that movement. But I have to say it's worth noting that I don't think Adams had a fantastic game, and Howe's had some okay moments. But there was a goal where he was late to the contest. I'm not sure if the young Freo forward, big lump of a lad, kicked their second to last goal, I think it was. And Howes was his man, and it was the classic situation where T-Mac would have just smashed the pack and brought it to ground. And Howes didn't even get to the contest. He pulled up from it. And, that's really where, that third tall is so important to be able to get in and bring the ball to ground. It was, and Howes he had a couple of shock and turnovers. He did some nice things as well. But, I don't think he really sort of said, pick me round one, and I don't think Adams did either.
We're gonna talk about the defence shortly. Let's move on to some positives before we get back into the doom and gloom. Smurf writes, how good was it to see Clary back to his blistering best form? Love that he slotted through 3 goals. The last one was my favourite. Will be a weapon for us this year. Bring on the real stuff. Bigfoot adds, after the trade week from hell when I thought we would lose our beloved Track, it was so great to see him burst through that first centre clearance. 33 possessions and 9 clearances. Welcome back, Track. Lazy says, Track and Clary's performances and Clary's excellent physical condition was better news than any result on the day. This is very encouraging. Swooper Northey writes, welcome back, Andy, George and B-Man. Looking forward to another year of the podcast. It's early March, so I'll stick with the positives following the pre-season match against Freo. The return of Track looks like he hasn't missed a beat. Great for him to get a game under his belt without injury. And Clary's comeback, he looks fit, strong and quick. Dare I say it, back to the Clary of old. And finally, Newport 34 adds, seriously though, how good were Track and Clary? 61 posies between them. Pump for the season ahead. Go D's. So, George, you can just feel the excitement from the fans, and honestly, it's hard not to get swept up in it all. Clary looked like the Clary of old. 3 goals, explosive at the contest, and that last goal was just chef's kiss. He's pure class. If he stays fit, he's going to be an absolute weapon for us this year, and there's no reason to say he won't. Track, after all the trade week hysteria, seeing him storm out the first centre bounce, just felt right. 33 touches, 13 contested, 12 score involvements, 10 inside 50s, 9 clearances, nearly 600 metres gained, and should have had a couple of goals too. It's just like he never left. Having both of them firing and makes a massive difference to our midfield mix, George.
Can't add much more than that, can I? It's compared to where we were even at this time last year pre-season with Clary's situation, and then ultimately by mid-season with Petracca, just to have those 2 players back, gives us a lot of faith and hope. But it was just a joy to watch both of those players playing their best football. It's you see it with the premier players in other sides as well, and those 2 are certainly our two of our best players on the field when they're executing like they were. It was good to see Clary moving a lot further forward than what he has traditionally, and kicking straight. He, as a goal, I don't think he's kicked all that many goals in his whole career, but it was good to see him in this game, and just did it with real authority as well. There wasn't any question about where the ball was going, which was
and one in particular, George, sorry to interrupt, on that was not his left footer, the other one that he set shot where he allowed the wind to shape it back.
Yep.
That was like, I knew he'd kick that goal because I knew he'd have the ability to use the wind and shape it back, because leaving aside everything else, he is like old school football IQ, that bloke. He is a gem.
Yeah, and he's the word you just used. His IQ is just superb, and shows how much we missed him last year. He's like I suspect Harvey Langford is, like Cozzy is. He knows where the ball's going before he gets it, and he's got an extraordinary ability to get it. There are certainly in this game a number of occasions where he's fighting 2 or 3 players, or he's being tackled at the same time, and somehow he gets the ball out. And that's why he's just a top quality player, and we're glad he's playing for us. This was again a good example of why we have practice matches. The Fremantle midfield are a very, very good midfield. Let's have no qualms about that. The fact that Track and Track and Oliver were able to compete against that good quality midfield shows that we've got something that will work. Like I said, if you're just practicing amongst yourselves, you don't know how good they are, you don't know whether it's going to work, you don't know how bad they are, but now you've seen how good they are, and they are definitely back to their best. So let's hope that they stay injury free for the whole season, because we have a lot riding on both their backs, and Max as well as a midfield ruckman.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I was just going to say, just going back to that point about game plan and having the players, one of the things I heard Goody talk about ages ago, and I've heard lots of coaches talk about this in terms of, is that there's a game plan, you've got your philosophy and all of those things about how you want to play, but at the same time, you to an element, you need to shape your game plan around the players you've got. And when you've got, our two best players, and that's what they look like on the weekend, well, our three best players were our four best players, in no particular order, Track, Clary, Maxi and Viney were our four best players, and probably Langdon fifth, and on the weekend. So certainly those top four, is that when you've got two bulls of that power, is that you've got we played a high pressure game in that first quarter. They kept on making comment on about it. We trapped it in the forward half, so we had more time in forward half. So it was interesting that maybe part of Goody's work that he's trying to do is, how does he knit together that old style of high pressure, trap it in the forward half and keep it trapped in there, with a more open running style, and particularly when you've two of your chess pieces power players like Oliver and Petracca. So again, we still play one down at stoppages, and that's a hallmark of Goody's coaching. And then forcing to, so he won't throw out the baby with the bathwater. He'll keep, in part because of the players we got. But just one bit about Clary's IQ, George, was this bit of play that, and it does my head in when you see players not do this, but it just shows how quick his brain is on the footy field. He was involved in a chain of handballs on the outer wing, on the non-camera, on the opposite side to where the camera's pointing. And it was one of those chains of handball that you just can see watching it, that if they go to handball on, it's going to break down because the player's already sort of either run behind him or he's covered. And he went to handball, and unlike so many players, he stopped himself and waited and then went back inside. But 9 out of 10 players would have just given that next give. We would have turned it over. His IQ is off the charts. Just the only thing I'd track is that he, I wish he could kick more accurately. He's a shocker. And his technique is, he drops it from such a high height. If you watch him, he sort of brings the ball up in the air and it goes down. And there are a couple of shots where you just like, he could have iced it. Not iced it, but he could have definitely covered the ground. So, I don't know whether it's a bit late in his career to improve much that aspect, but it is frustrating.
Yeah, I don't know if you can improve that type of stuff this late in the game. But just on Clary quickly, that lightning handball, almost a throw, was back. And
set up
it's almost too good.
Too,
yeah. I hope he doesn't get called for throws, because I don't think they are throws, but I think they can be interpreted as them, wrongly interpreted as them by the umps. Master Chief writes, good to have you guys back. Excellent show last week. Would love to get your thoughts on Langdon's new role through the middle. Do you think we will persist with this, or will he return to the wing? So, Binman, many on Demonland were intrigued when we heard the news that Langers would perhaps be earmarked for this new role in the midfield. It's had 30 possessions, only 8 contested, but he's had 8 score involvements, 7 inside 57 marks, 4 tackles, 463 metres gained. What were your thoughts on his game, and do you see us persisting with this role?
Yes. Working backwards, I absolutely will persist with it. I mean, he's trained with the midfield all season. They're not going to, they're not going to change course now. I mean, at some point in the season they will, but he was excellent. And again, I wish he could kick a bit more accurately. But I think he brings. As I've talked about, I think one of our biggest issues with the transition game is our lack of leg speed, our lack of genuine leg speed. Like Freo have got a massive advantage over us with that. He's one of our quicker players. He's also one of our fitter players. So the thing about having him on the wing is that oppositions were starting to go down the opposite wing to him, such was his effectiveness. So essentially, you lose any benefit, even if it's 50-50, 50% of the time it's going down the opposite wing to him, is that, you lose the benefit of his leg speed in that circumstance. Whereas he's on the ball, he's more involved in the game. He can get himself involved, and that mitigates the issue about our leg speed a lot, I reckon. Similarly, with having Cos play on ball, it mitigates our lack of leg speed around the ground. Ditto for Windsor back. I think I said that last week. I really like. The other thing I was thinking about on the weekend, it's a bit like a slip cordon you have your skipper at 1 and you have, your confidant at 2, and you have people who can read the game in slip cordon and involved, and, they have discussions about tactics, and they're in the skipper's ear, and of course the keeper's there. And that's what it felt a bit like with, our guns, like, and add Langdon to that mix in the midfield. He's talking to Maxi. I really like it. And I think that, they've obviously committed to it. I think it's a winner. A big driver, I talked about this, I think a big driver is we've got enough players who can play that wing role, high half forward role. Lindsay sort of played half-back flank wing. You've got Billings who's playing high half forward. Sharp, I thought, was impressive. You've got high half forward. So we've got those outside runners. I really like him on ball.
The downside that because I'm half empty, glass half empty, the downside of putting Langers in there is the same as what happened with Neil Bullen when we put him in the middle last year, is actually getting the ball, more importantly, stopping the opposition third getting the ball. That if you're not a natural midfielder, which I don't think he's a natural midfielder, they keep getting beaten by the opposition player. There are a couple of times, even in this game, where Langdon's man just simply left him, just completely disappeared. I know why they've put him in there, is to try to get that extra speed into the middle, because, in all honesty, we've got a lot of plotters in the middle. None of them are fast. When you compare Brayshaw, except Cos, and that's why you're playing Cos in the midfield.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But Oliver and Petracca and Viney and are all plotters. We've got no speed out of the middle, which is a sharp contrast, for example, in this game with the speed of Sarong and Brayshaw, and even Jackson as a ruckman. We got exposed big time in this game by speed, and that's why we're trying to put some speed into it. I don't know that Langdon's the answer for it. I don't think we actually have anybody at the moment who can do that, because Sparrow's not a fast player either.
Windsor might be that sort of, but I think you're right. That's that was a big issue for us last year, is opposition mids running. You made that point during one of the shows, with opposition mids running away from our mids. So I think that is definitely a factor in it. And give Lindsay some time. He's an option in there. I think Colt's an option in there as well. But they'll stick with it. And he's like, if Langdon is a smart guy. He'll learn. He'll get better. I think it's reasonable for a reasonable observation. He's on natural mid because he's never really played there. So but he's the sort of player who will work on it, get better, and improve in it. I thought he was really good in this game. And whatever position he's in, he'll still do his 15, 16, 17 kilometres.
Yeah.
Radelaide writes, I thought Rivers had a really poor game. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater on the back of one poor practice match, but with a full-strength midfield featuring Track, Clary and Jack, along with cameos from Cozzy, Langers and eventually Langford, I'd prefer to see Rivers move back into defence. I like his run and carry and distribution. I think his run and carry and distribution would be more valuable in that role, similar to how Houston played for Port/Collingwood. What do you guys think? Well, I agree that we shouldn't make any hasty decisions based on one poor game. The decision to fast-track Rivers into the midfield was largely driven by necessity last year with Track's injury and Clary's reduced dominance, as we we know is well documented in the middle. There's certainly an argument to be made that if required, he could return to defence while still playing occasional midfield minutes. George, what do you think?
Yeah, once again, I don't think you need to take too much from this game. All of a sudden, I didn't see Rivers play a great deal in the midfield and around the ball, but I think that was deliberate because they were running with Track and Oliver and Viney, and then they were trying Langford and they were trying Langdon. They were trying all these other options, and then Cozzy in the final quarter as well. We know what we're going to get out of Rivers, whether he's playing in the midfield or whether he's going to be playing in the half-back line. Personally, I prefer to see him in the back line simply because but he's not needed as much if we've got all these other players playing in the midfield. So wouldn't write it off. It's a nice option to have during the season, should the similar circumstances arise, or at certain points in the game where you can call upon a player like Rivers to play that role. It was almost like the role that we had Brayshaw playing a couple of years ago.
I was going to say very similar, sort of on the defensive side of the contest, using his defensive smarts.
Yeah, or if you want him in the back line to play, just last man in defence, all of a sudden Brayshaw was there. I think Rivers is the type of player who's the genuine swing man. So I wouldn't read anything into this game at all. I don't think that he was deliberately. I think he was deliberately left out of the middle so that they could look and see what other players could do in this game.
And it's worth noting that he only had 71% game time on ground. And normally he's up around the 85, 86, 87, 88. So, he didn't even play 3/4 of game time. He's still got 250-odd metres gained. So it is an interesting point, though, about having, he's another big body, is that if you think of Rivers, who's a big body mid, Langford, it's a big body mid, Clary's a big bodied mid, and obviously Track's a big bodied mid. I don't think we'll see much of Sparrow in the centre this year, and I like the position, him playing a sort of aggressive half forward. He's got good sticky hands, and he takes advantage of it when he gets his chances. So I thought his game was really impressive, actually, and I'm really pleased to see Sparrow get a bit more rope to, a bit more freedom to play aggressive and offensive rather than, being a defensive sort of player, which it's interesting to say that, George, about Rivers. I thought that's a really good thought of the way, because that was the role, that Gus role, that sort of defensive mid who would basically choose where to go and go back if it was necessary. And, that was Gus's strength. That was what he did so well in his last season. That was the role that they asked Sparrow to play, pretty much last year. And I don't think, he didn't do it quite as well. And I think that's the sort of role that Rivers played yesterday. I reckon that's a good call.
Sparrow's first 10 minutes of the game was fantastic. His pressure was incredible, and that tackling was...
Still got a nice mark, two good marks.
Yeah.
It just shows how hard it is to take contested marks. He was the top. He had 2 contested marks. No one else had more contested marks for the Ds. Both were up forward, both two contested marks inside 50, and we wouldn't have had too many more, I reckon. Turner took one, didn't he? And AJ took one as well.
Yep.
Singer writes, granted it was just a practice match, but I had some concerns about our defence. The slow intensity of chipping it around, ball movement out of the back line lacked confidence at times. While there's been a push to avoid blindly kicking long to Max on the flank, this alternative approach didn't seem convincing. Windsor still looks a long way off from mastering the art of defending and distributing, and I'm not sold on Howes as a defender. Adams showed some nice glimpses, but he's nowhere near ready to replace May, Petty or Lever. We really missed Petty, and I can only hope his absence wasn't due to injury. Bowie had an absolute shocker. His disposal was arguably the worst in the team, which is very concerning. Judd McVee's absence was felt. I read somewhere that 7 of our backmen only laid 3 tackles. Yikes. On a positive note, Salem was back to his sublime best. That said, alarm bells are ringing. We simply can't afford to bleed goals. So, Pimhan, what did you make out? I think you've sort of touched on this anyway about our kick-out strategy, the chipping around ball movement, was something new. And while While we're on our back line, what are your thoughts on Windsor's role as a distributor off half-back? He's only had 9 possessions in the game, 269 metres gained. But considering he's had an injury-interrupted pre-season, especially in the last few weeks, I think it's he's probably finding his rhythm down there, and especially he only returned back to training last week after he had those things. So I've got a couple of questions to ask you. So what do you think of Windsor?
We'll just go back to. I mean, I agree with the sort of comment about the defensive stuff. I think it's no easy feat to develop a new model, essentially. So I agree. And like I said before, is at one point just before three-quarter time, it was 28 inside 50s for 19 scores, which is, that is not a great number. It did change a little bit by the end of the game, but still three-quarters of the game, they went inside, they scored, and were more accurate than us. I think it's worth pointing out, though, that, like we're developing a new structure. We still didn't have, I have T-Mac in my best 23 and in the back half, McVee as well, and Petty. So, back half, they often talk about 7. So there's 7 players, 1 on the bench and the 6 on the field. 3 of almost 50% of our best defensive unit weren't in that game. So I think that's worth sort of noting. I thought May was back to his best. He was awesome. I thought Lever was good as well. It does concern me, and it really concerns me. Again, another, the thing I'd add to that is what I said before is we just struggle big time to cover those small to medium forwards. Like, every single time. Brisbane, that's where they have the wood on us. It's always those players who kill us for Freo. It's a real challenge for us, and AMW going down, I think, is going to prove to be a big problem for us. I'm hoping Seston maybe he's probably not got the wheels for that position. He's got the smarts to play down back. We really will miss McVee. He's probably the player we miss arguably the most. As for Windsor, give the fella time. I think it's really, again, as I said at the top of the show, it was a windy day. It was across the other side of the country. It was in bloody Mandurah, down south out of Perth in some country town. And it was 32 degrees, 33 degrees. And the players who are going to most struggle with that are the young players. That's just a fact. They haven't got they haven't got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 13 in Maxi's case, or 14 of pre-seasons where, they've done all of that training. I thought a couple of examples where he ran and carry, that's what we won't want to see from him. He was the beneficiary of a couple of those long handballs. He did do a bit of that, what George was talking about, other clubs. He's right, George is right, that sort of run and get, the player running past the thing. He did a couple of them. And he did a beautiful kick inside 50 at one point that set up a goal. It was just a super classy kick. I've got no worries about him. And it's also worth noting about Windsor in this game is that he's been off legs for 2 weeks with an infection. So he's been in a moon boot for, I was really, to be honest, quite surprised he played, because it was only last week track watchers were saying he still wasn't running. So he had basically, with that foot infection that he had 2 weeks of no running. So, I think that's important to note. I really love him off the halfback.
I have a feeling they fast-tracked his return because they wanted to see him in a practice scenario playing.
Yeah, to give him some, exactly, totally.
And as I've noted before, and Binman just noticed, 50% of the defenders weren't there. This was the only opportunity to see Adams and Howes and even Winter playing a backman's role in a team that plays its own defence. I know Binman's picked it out with Howes, but also there was one point with Adams as well, where May came to him afterwards and said, "You needed to go out."
He did. He got caught in no man's land.
He got caught in no man's, yeah.
For a defender. He's been a defender as a junior as well. That was,
but the problem for Adams, and even Windsor is, last year down at Casey, you had Tomlinson, who was the sole backman, effectively, and there was no zone defence. These guys haven't played it. This was the opportunity to teach them how to play within a proper zone defence. They have got a lot of learning to do. You probably won't see very much of them this year until they do develop those skills. Even the way Bowie was playing, he was playing much deeper than he ever.
He was playing much deeper, and that's because AMW is not playing. That's the thing. You're right. That's right. Yeah. Exactly right. He's playing a lot deeper. A lot of his kicks were under pressure, and those double kicks, they're probably trained to do it. You're still better to get it outside 50, and even if they have a shot, it's from 50, not
exactly.
From, you know.
And the other thing that is so easy to forget in this game, because we were trying the fast forward movement on getting those turnovers, how many goals did Fremantle get from Joe the Goose in the goal square?
Yeah.
The defenders had no chance whatsoever, but everybody blames the defence for falling apart.
Yeah.
It wasn't the defence, it was what was coming in from halfway up the field. You won't see that sort of opportunity, though you won't see that happen during the season with Melbourne where a team kicks 3 or 4 goals from the goal square.
Yeah.
And people like
from turnovers. You'll see turnovers
because you won't see Walters getting out the back on his own, because there won't be any back to get out to. Like we saw too often in this game.
That example, George, is a really important. Like, it's the thing about that defensive stuff. They obviously have to create a new sort of model, like the defensive system. So it'll still be zone, but they've got new places to run to. They've got, regardless of whether you think Team Mac Andy's in that best defensive unit, it's still 3 players who are new to it. Relatively new, Howes, Adams, and Windsor as well. And that bit of play that you pointed out that Adams did was, as much as anything, because he's a defender, so he knows how to defend, but he's a one-on-one. He was never going to get to the contact. I was watching it, and I could see that he didn't go hard enough to begin with and got himself caught, and that was his man who marked. Turned around, and I forget the player who marked, but he ended up not coming in third man to spoil the contest, and it got out the back to his man. So, but what I was thinking about that in terms of, if you're trying to develop new systems, so much practice and drilling and timing goes into it, is that's where it breaks down. When you see teams implementing a new defensive system, suddenly you think, well, what are they doing there? And that's exactly what happened to Adams. Just back to Windsor, again, it's important to put things in context. He only had 61% game time on ground. So the other one, we'll talk about him in a sec, was Langford. He only had 55%. So they're clearly managing the loads of those younger players. 61% for a defender is like, ordinarily once the season starts, if he'll be up, but he'll be 85%, of the time on ground. So, that's a lot of time off the ground, 61% time on ground.
Lefty writes, on last week's podcast, everyone was understandably thrilled with our new recruits, both traded and drafted. However, I must admit I was a little underwhelmed this week. People have been very critical about a practice match. While it's expected that the young players will take time to develop, Langford looked lost, and I didn't even realise Sharp was on the field until halfway through the match. On a positive note, Lindsay showed some nice touches and displayed excellent disposal. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the performances of Sharp, Langford, Lindsay and Johnson. And I really think some people need to temper their expectations of first-year players, even if they have a body that's ready-made for AFL footy. George, we've got a separate question coming up about Aidan Johnson, so perhaps focus on the games of Sharp, Langford and Lindsay.
Yeah, well, we'll leave AJ to later, because I think he did very well in this game. And again, don't expect too much in this game. People were being played in different roles. Sharp was obviously not playing as much forward. I think they were trying to get Chandler more involved in the game than the previous week, where Sharp was able to drift forward. Fritsch was in the side this week, so all of a sudden there's another hole being filled in the forward line that Sharp was able to fill last week.
Permanent forward, basically.
Yeah. We were trying options. I think Sharp did very well. Got to where he needed to be at the fall of the ball on a number of occasions. I think he's one of those options that we can use on the wing if needed, as well. So it'll be and the fact that he's more mature than the other draftees, I think, will put him in better stead come the season proper. He's been a nice pickup. again, don't take too much out of this game about how many kicks he got or how many goals he got. They were trying people in different roles all during the game. Lindsay, just love Lindsay, love his kicking. It is just first rate. It's been such a long time since we've had someone who can kick so well, so consistently, all the time. To advantage. Never underestimate to advantage. You know, people love to see people hitting players on the chest. That's the easy one almost. The hard one is kicking it to the right location for them to take full advantage of it as the ball's moved up the field. But he is superb. He's got that vision and he just delivers so beautifully. He's just a classic left foot kick. Just love to watch him. Langford, again, don't read anything to it. You know, even that, because we were watching on the television, there was a vision of him on the bench in the last quarter. It was 32 degrees out there. It's the first time he's encountered another AFL side. He's a big body.
In his first season.
He was halfway to blowing up in this game, not unsurprisingly. When he had the opportunity in the midfield and around the ground, he showed plenty. They were also playing him up forward a bit as well, which I don't think really played to his advantages all that much.
But he almost took a screamer and brought the ball to ground. It was an impressive bit of play.
Yeah, but you know, his meat and veggies is going to be in the midfield. And in this game, we didn't need him in the midfield because we had our four best players playing in there. So it's not surprising that he got a small amount of time, no purpose. We know what he's going to produce. I think we'll still see him playing in the seniors at a relatively early stage in the season.
He'll play round one for sure. He'll play round one. And he had, again, I mentioned before, he only had 55% time on ground. He had 11 disposals, 2 more than Sharp, who was 81% of the time on ground. Nearly half of his possessions were contested. He had 5 contested possessions. He had 2 clearances. He didn't get to go, the heat and all of that stuff. And I don't think he attended. Did he go to a centre square clearance? If he did, it couldn't have been more than 1 or 2. So they're pretty good numbers.
Yeah.
For half a game time, for 50%, you'd be okay with 23, 24 possessions and 11 contested, wouldn't you?
Yeah. And Ben Mann's made another prediction for, he is a definite for round one. Look what happened to T-Mac last week.
Well, what happened to T-Mac last week? He
didn't play.
Will be there round one as well. He'll be a lock in round one. Langford will be a lock in round one. Howes will not be in that team. Adams will not be in that team. Langford will be playing round one, and so will Lindsay.
I don't think T-Mac will be playing round one.
We'll see. He will be playing round one.
Okay.
He was over there. He got brought over. He played for Casey, dominated at Casey, and they said get on the plane and go over there, son.
I think he was there because Petty, for some inexplicable reason that we don't know
family
yet.
Reasons. It said the club said
family reasons.
Why would they bring T-Mac over to cover for Petty when they in a practice game?
I think he was there cover. He didn't play, and after he played a full game in the reserves, I think he was there. If May or Lever went down early, like happened with Javier. But anyway, we don't know. Let's see. We'll
and so will Langford. And on Sharp, just a thing on Sharp is that I thought his fitness is so evident. He was still running. That goal he kicked, 2 things stood out. One, he got the ball on the half-back flank. He ran the length of the ground, and I cannot tell you how happy I was with the way he kicked that goal. He didn't try to smash it through. It was windy. Yeah. He was exhausted after having just run 100 metres, been involved in 2 handball receives, and he guided it through. He took 2 bounces and guided it through. One, that told me he's got footy smarts. 2, how fit do you have to be at the end of the game in that heat to run the length that, from the halfback flank inside 50, 2 bounces and kick a goal and still be able to execute. That I thought that was just about the standout bit of play for the day, and to me, he's another lock for round one. I think they've done great. He's a nibbler replacement, and based on what I've seen in terms of his goal kicking, a more natural goal kicker.
Well, I was just about to say he's describes nibbler to a T, except for that execution for goal.
And so far we've got Bin Man's got 30 players playing for round one.
No,
and we'll find out.
I got 4.
And we'll find out.
On the bubble, but
and we'll find out whether Bin Man's going to be the kiss of death or other worse to these players.
Well, if bloody David King and that mob can make up any number of predictions, then,
did you hear that, Andy? He's listening to David King now.
No. He's on the money, David King, when he said these are on the up.
We'll see. Okay, Lazy says, didn't see the game, but read in the report that Aiden Johnson, what are these Demon fans not watching the game? Aiden Johnson competed hard all day and was rewarded with a goal for his efforts late. With JVR's back spasm and possible doubt for round one, what are the chances of Johnson getting the nod? Dominion adds, JVR's early injury quickly exposed our lack of depth in the forward line, as well as the flow-on effect it had on our ability to provide in-game ruck support for Max without compromising our tall forward stocks. Hopefully his back spasms were just a one-off rather than a sign of a more significant issue that could sideline him for an extended period. If Rue isn't available for round one, what do you think the makeup of our forward line will look like? So, big man, what do you make of Aiden Johnson's game this week? And last week we only got to see him for a quarter in the ruck, but this time he had a chance to play as a key forward with some relief ruck duties. Took 4 marks, should have finished with 2 goals. He missed an absolute sitter from directly in front, and statistically, it's a modest game, just the 9 possessions and 2 hit-outs. And just before you go on, we still haven't had confirmation of JVR's back spasm, whether it's serious enough to sideline him. Post-match, I think the club reassured us he'd be fine for round one, but as we said before, I'd heard that from 2 other clubs.
We said, I hope round one. Hope.
So let's see what happens, but that's my MFCSS talking. So based on what you saw from AJ, do you think he's ready to step in if Rue isn't available for round one, or will he play round one as well and join these guys? Because otherwise JVR is rucking, and with that back spasm, I don't want him rucking.
Back spasm sounds like a good name for a punk record, doesn't it? The back spasms. Just working backward, Dominion, I can't agree that JVR's early injury quickly exposed our lack of depth in the forward line. In fact, quite the opposite. Again, I point out that we had 35 scoring shots. Like that, by any measure, that's impressive. And we lost our key forward, our best forward, and we're still able to manage 2 goals to Turner. Is that right? He got kicked 2 goals?
2 late goals, yes.
Well, it doesn't matter when he got them. I didn't, you don't have to put a caveat on them. He got 2 goals.
Match might have been
Johnson got a goal, so that's 3 goals from key forwards. We had Fritter, who's giving off goals to Billings to boost Billings' confidence. So it's like, we got Sparrow taking marks. As I said, we had 14 marks inside 50. In fact, I would say him going, and then we had Aiden Johnson, who also, I've already mentioned him. But yeah, I would argue that it in fact showed that, we're pretty well stocked for tall. Turner is the other player. Did I mention him as well?
We've kicked 22 goals, 24.
Yeah, so I don't agree with that. Like I said this all last year, our forward line's fine. It's about getting it in quickly enough. 35 scoring shots for any team. I don't know. I'll have a look before next week, but I suspect 35 scoring shots. If there was a ladder of scoring shots in the Community Cup games, in those practice games, it would be up near the very top of that list of scoring shots. So, I think that. Again, it's much overstated. About Aiden Johnson, it's sort of a case for, I think that comparison to Cam Pedersen is such a good one because he's the sort of player you just want to succeed. His effort was fantastic. I personally, he seems like a ripping bloke. I love that sort of player who's so wholehearted and gives everything to every single contest. I love the fact that, that mark his goal came from a kick that Viney did to put it out into his space. And it was a classic sort of forwards mark where he was able to hold off his defender and fall to his right to take the mark. He worked super hard in ruckman. He doesn't look the most natural ruck, I don't reckon. But, I really hope Obviously, JVR's okay. I really, really hope that he's no lock for round one. That's for sure. I thought his effort was fantastic in this game. Just I wasn't sure though. Was he? He looked like he had the training jumper on. Did he come on for? Was he the sub?
Are you talking about Johnson?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he did have the training jumper. I think he might have.
He certainly didn't play the whole game, and I didn't notice him on the ground for probably until half time.
No, I think he came. I think he did come on. I think they were waiting to see whether JVR would come right. They were running him along the boundary.
They didn't take him out of the game to the beginning of the second quarter.
So that's when I think he did come in.
That's maybe when Johnson came on. Look, I thought, we need someone who can take a ruck other than JVR. Like the back spasm thing is, to me, just touch wood, he's okay, but it's just reinforces I want him inside 50. I don't want him, up around the ground getting smashed. And, Aiden Johnson is a competitor. He can do that chop out. He can fight down forward and kick a couple of goals a goal a game, take the ruck outs, hit outs down forward, give Max a chop out. He will have earned his spot. He obviously, he looks a bit, he doesn't look like the most natural AFL player, but you've got to love that sort of effort. I'm hopeful that he'll be the player. It's a big jump up, isn't it? So, but obviously that's what they're thinking, is that we're not going to run with two rucks. We're not going to run Campbell and Max. We're simply not. So if it's not Johnson and Maxi, then that unfortunately leaves, maybe a combination of Petty, but though he's, it seems JVR, and I just don't want to see that. I'd rather Aiden Johnson being in the side, and come near the end of the season, revisit it, and then maybe JVR's in a better, I just want JVR to have a good run at it and spend time up forward.
More importantly, AJ just gives us options, the same as Campbell gives us options. We've got a ruck who can play forward and be aggressive. We've got a forward who's aggressive and can play ruck. And even in this practice game, when he was in the ruck against I think it was Tracy that was playing this, he acquitted himself very well. And that's all you need out of a guy like that, to give Max that cut out for 5 to 10 minutes in the quarter. He's got a mature body. He knows how to kick straight, which is good when he does get the ball in his hand. So
he's got a good, decent footy IQ. It looks like
he's everything that we need. That as I said last week, that we've been missing for the last 3 years up forward, and in the ruck, that option without having to use JVR, 20-year-old into the ruck. It's not the thing you want to be doing with one of your most talented forwards.
One thing I thought I did have, could you run someone like AJ as the sub, like they did in this game, and bring him on at quarter time for, maybe take Maxi off, but like to let someone, let Maxi ruck in that first quarter and then bring the sub on at quarter time or half time, and then take a fair bit of the rucking, or use him as a sub to, I'm not sure whether they don't like to use the bigs as a sub because doesn't give them much flexibility, I guess. So, but another sort of, manful effort he's going to be an effort player. And as I said, the comparisons to Cam Pedersen's a good one. Both, players who are real effort players and forward, sometime ruck.
And shout out to Cam Pedersen. Apparently he's pulling the boots on for the Cows Bulldogs again this season, so he's still going around.
Well done, Pedersen.
I thought you were going to say shout out. Apparently he listens to the podcast. I was like,
well, he might do.
He might. Yeah, shout out to Cam.
And to the question, who would come in? Maybe if he can't play, JVR, I'd be furious if he can't. But if he can't play, then maybe Jefferson gets his shot. Apparently, he was all right in the Casey game.
I think AJ is probably ahead of Jefferson in the pecking order. Otherwise,
well, yeah, that's assuming. Let's assume AJ's in anyway.
I don't know.
His role will be giving whether they use him as a second ruck, not as a forward. Let's face it.
Well, just say JVR's out. Who's doing the relief rucking? It's not Jefferson.
I think Johnson will be in the side potentially anyway. like even if JVR's playing, because
there's 31 players in the side so far already.
Come on, I've only mentioned it. I said maybe on him.
All right, Scroll says Max was banged up from pillar to post throughout the whole match and was clearly struggling when he hobbled off late in the third quarter. Given his age and the need to carefully manage him throughout the season, especially in what was just a practice match, why on earth was he sent back on in the last quarter? With JVR already sidelined, the last thing we need is another key big man in doubt for round one. I was absolutely furious, honestly. I nearly launched a can of Melbourne bitter through the telly. To be fair, I was just as furious. It was a practice match, and with only a quarter to go, we already obviously lost JVR. We didn't have another rucker, but that's exactly the point. We'd already lost one key tool. Why were we playing? And as you mentioned, it's 35-degree heat. If they were desperate to get the kilometres into Max, as they sort of intimated on the commentary, they just have him run laps around the ground after the game. George, Skrull and I overreacting here? Were you just as livid? Or more importantly, did you end up throwing a can of VB or some other canned beverage at the TV?
Well, I'm not a drinker, so I won't be throwing a can of VB at the TV.
But you have a can just for that purpose.
Yeah. No, I'm afraid I'm with Scroll and with Andy in this one. I've got no idea whatsoever why, particularly in that last quarter where there was absolutely nothing at stake.
When he came back on, I thought
when he came back, yeah, exactly. Why is he coming back on with 5 minutes to go in the game? Yeah, it's just ridiculous. Yeah.
Was that you or me? Oh, that was me. It was anyway. It was
somebody's won sale of the century, I think, on that one. But either that or it's a basketball game going on somewhere with an organ. No idea whatsoever why he was played for that long in this game in the first place, in that ridiculous temperatures, and then coming back on. I just can't understand it. Just simply, I cannot understand it. So, but it is what it is, and the fans would have been absolutely, utterly furious if he had sustained an injury in this meaningless game. So, yeah, too strange for us mere supporters to understand.
All right, let's move on. Red Jacket says, I'd love to hear the panel's thoughts on how we utilise Cozzy in this match. I understand that he'll be unavailable for the first 3 rounds and that this game served as a dress rehearsal for round one, as well as for navigating those early weeks without him. That said, it's still crucial to get some game time and conditioning into him, given that he won't play for 5 weeks and only managed a quarter yesterday. That brief stint, however, was enough to remind us just how impactful he is. His absence in the first 3 quarters starkly exposed our deficiencies in the small forward department, as well as the impact player in the middle. We're going to feel he's lost significantly in the open rounds. Simply put, Chandler does not provide the same output, and if we do lose Cozzy at season's end, which I feel is a very real possibility, we'll be up the proverbial creek. B-Man, did you have any problems with the way that we utilise Cozzy in this match?
Not at all. I had to laugh though. Simpson, I mean, I want their job. I want bloody Simpson's job. He's paid who knows what he's paid to be a special comments player, and he's laconic as all get out. Like, some of his insights were interesting. But for about half a quarter, they were banging on about why they weren't playing Cozzy until finally Pavlich, I think, said, I think it was Pavlich, said, well, he's suspended round one.
I think he was given a note as well. I don't think he knew that.
Yeah. Well, it's like they've got bloody producers talking to him in the ear. Like, come on. And then at some point earlier in the game, Simpson said, I haven't done any research on Melbourne.
Yeah, he did say that.
It's like, it's like, right, going to a job interview and saying, oh, look, I hadn't looked at your website, but I've heard that you're a pretty good organizer. I'm like, it was embarrassing. And, for at least 20 minutes, they were banging on about what the deal is with Cozzy. Surely they would do that, until the note was passed or the producer said into their ear, well, he's not playing for the first 3 rounds. And they go, oh, yeah, well, that would be the reason. And so, of course, exactly as they said on the telecast, that it made sense in the context of he's not going to be there for the first 3 rounds. So you've got to practice your setups both in the middle and up forward without them. I mean, as we've talked about ad infinitum, it's a practice game. You also want to replicate some of the setups and stuff for your first 3 rounds. So then the question would be, well, why bother bringing him? And at least part of that is that they obviously wanted to bring across all the WA boys, as many as possible across to Perth. So, I would have personally kept him away from, Freo at any opportunity. But, so I thought that was totally fine. Like, again, we weren't out to win the game. It didn't matter what the score was. As Red Jacket points out, like, he was awesome when he came on. It was like seeing someone, it was incredible, like how he was running on top of the ground, and it sort of, he looked even better than he normally would because of that comparative freshness that he came on. It'd be a pretty good sub to bring on, wouldn't he, for power plays? And I had no problems with how they played him. And I agree totally. It was like, he's just a star. I love him around the ball. I thought he would be up forward this year because we had so many midfield, but maybe it's his leg speed. It's also his kicking. Did you notice how effective his kicking were, how few times he missed those, otherwise, very hittable kicks, those short ones that he does. I agree. Chandler's not even in the same ballpark, but pressure is the key, I guess, for that. As for losing Cozzy at season's end, it's all right because we'll get Jackson in that trade. So, Jackson's coming home.
Well, that's interesting. We can perhaps talk about that quickly now. I think that that tells me that story's come out, and it was the thing from Mitch Cleary said, spearheaded by Melbourne or whatever. I think that's a good indication that I think the club knows that we're going to lose Cozzy. He wants to go back. He wants to get us a fair deal or whatever. But if Jackson's coming back, what do you think? Do you think that'll be a straight swap? No other picks going in there?
Yeah, exactly. Well, AJ probably hopes that Jackson doesn't come back because there's your second ruck, problem solved. So
it'll be our first ruck soon.
We'll do fine at it if Cozzy go. I hate to see him go too, but like as I've said, the Jared Healy rule, I'm not going to worry about. I'm not going to spend a single second worrying all season about that. If it happens, it happens. And
I think we'll get fairly compensated, pretty much. I think we should get at least 2 first rounds or Luke Jackson. Hopefully we can.
The one thing I laughed about in that article that I read is Jackson, for personal reasons, went to bloody Surf Coast surfing. It's probably another player will end up at Geelong for, what's the deal? Can't they drive for 50 minutes down the highway from Melbourne to go surfing?
I think we're going to see a lot of this sort of conjecture, not just Jackson or Cozzy during the season, but I note that Bontempelli, for example, hasn't re-signed, and I think there's a lot of top end players are going to be available this year, simply because the clubs are going to be able to trade 2 years in advance, so they can offer right on day one of the trade period 3 first round draft picks for a Bontempelli, for a Cozzy, or for a Jackson. So they won't be the only ones. There will be a lot of player movement at the top end this year, so it'll be very interesting. Keep the media very intrigued for the whole season.
I just can't see Bontempelli.
That's where the industry wants to create useless noise for clicks and shits and giggles, because that'll just be and then with Tassie on the horizon, it's just going to be unbearable, the amount of will he go, will he not go, blah 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 blah. But at least with the talk about Jackson, which came out of the blue, I'd not heard anything about it. At least with every time they talk about Cos, it'll be like yin and yang. Every single time anyone, the media, footy fans, whoever mentions the risk of Cos going to Freo, there'll instantly be a rejoinder, and Jackson's coming back the other way. Yeah. They'll be talked about, so at least they'll be, mitigate the Cos talk, because 50% of it will be about Jackson. So.
Just quickly on, you were talking about the commentary. Did you realise that all the Fox Footy games this year are going to be commentated by Fox Footy commentators? So if you weren't happy with the weren't happy with the commentary on that, welcome to every every interstate game played that we play this year being commentated by people that have no idea about what's happening at the Demons. So get ready for that.
Maybe the next step for the Demonland podcast is to set up our own
commentary,
in-game commentary like BT did during the COVID era.
Have you seen the game day threads on Demonland? I fear there might be
it'd be fantastic
tears.
viewing and listening.
You could just read them out, Andy. You could just read out a game day thread.
Just read out. All right, just a couple more. Horny for Gorney writes, I don't want to be overly negative, but surely we have a better option than Jack Billings. He gets himself.
Give this question to George.
Yeah, exactly.
I gave it to George because I know exactly.
You'll get an honest answer.
That's right. That's right. I want to hear what George has to say. I want some controversy. I don't want a love fest. He gets himself into the right spots. I'll give him that. But for someone in the side as a connector because of his ball use, he just hasn't been reliable. He struggles to kick more than 30 metres, went 0 for 4 in front of goal and missed a couple of fairly straightforward kicks inside 50 to open targets. What do you think about swapping him for Wowie? His disposal might not be as polished, but at least he puts his all in and doesn't shy away from any contact. George, I know, as I mentioned, you're not the best cheerleader for Jack Billings. What are your thoughts on his game yesterday and the prospect of swapping him for someone else?
He gets into the right spots, unfortunately, because he's not in the other spots. His kicking is he was sold to us as a good kick from all reports. He is anything but a good kick. The fact that he had 3 set shots for goal and missed all of them, and then had running into an open goal from 30 metres out and still missed it, tells you about his kicking ability.
He didn't like stats.
Yeah, but the real concern was, as was pointed out by Horny about Gorney, was his third shot for goal failed to make the distance from 40. He just has no depth or power in his kicking. It's not surprising in a way that he gets the outcome. He's played 175 games. And I think we need to be looking at Sharp, or we need to be looking at Windsor, or we need to be looking at Lindsay as better options down the wing. The other thing that I particularly don't like about Billings is he slows the play up. The wingers should be the transition players that move it quickly. You look at Langford when he gets the ball on the wing. He runs, he carries. He's always constantly moving the ball straight away from where he gets it. If the ball's passed out to Billings, he stops, looks around, takes 3 steps backwards before he kicks. Unfortunately, by that stage, the defence has already run past. I think we've got far better options.
Mandalorian says the most frustrating aspect of the game for me was our accuracy in front of goal. This has been a persistent issue for several years with little to no improvement, and once again our set shot kicking was agonising to watch. I have virtually no confidence in most of our players when they line up for goal. Whether it's a technical flaw, nerves, or something else entirely, the fact remains that nothing has been done in any of our off-seasons to address it. The only thing more infuriating than winning the inside 50s and watching the ball rebound straight out, a problem that we've had in the past, is dominating inside 50s, generating scoring shots but failing to convert them into goals. Winning the scoring shots by 6 yet losing the game by 3 goals is simply unacceptable. Sure, they missed some chances too, but we squandered some absolute sitters, and that's inexcusable. And before anyone dismisses this is just a practice match, I shudder to think of how we'll fare when the real pressure kicks in. I have a voicemail from our good friend Noah.
Hi, this is Noah from Brighton. Just wanted to state I'd like to really thank you guys for doing a really good effort in publishing an amazing podcast. Just wanted to say that I was quite disappointed with the loss to Fremantle. Yes, I know it's a pre-season game and it can really show the up-and-comers like Langford and how he's going to go during the year. But what really frustrated me again was the amount of points we took. Basically, it was poor kicking and execution that probably cost us the game. Just wanted to hear the guys' opinions. As always, go Demons.
So it's a bit of a bugbear of mine. It's been like that for a long time. It's nauseating, and I lose a lot of sleep over it. I have zero confidence when one of our players is having a set shot for goal these days. 18 more inside 50, 6 more scoring shots, only 11 goals from 30 shots on goal. It's just putrid. Beer man, you've probably talked enough about it.
Yeah, it is. Look, I think one thing I will say is that there's no, any advantage they can get practicing goal kicking at training when they're AFL players already is incremental at best. Yeah. Surely you can improve a little bit, but this idea that a new forward coach or Williams or, you get some sort of technical expert in to improve goal kicking, it's just, really it's around the edges, because AFL players, by the time they get there, they've kicked the footy literally hundreds of thousands of times, each time reinforcing their technique. If they get to AFL level with poor technique, any improvement is at best incremental. I can think of only, in all the time I barracked for the D's, I can think maybe of half dozen players who I think have genuinely improved their kicking skills after becoming an AFL or VFL footballer. Jones was one, but again, just incremental. It is really, really frustrating. And, to be honest, I don't think there's much you can do about it. You can do things like get the ball in the corridor more often, so you're taking higher percentage kicks. It ends up being those Joe the Gooses that George talked about, where you're going to kick every one of them from the goal square. So we were getting, more of them in 21 when we were swarming. It'd be interesting to see if we can get that swarm back. There was a post from Kev Martin that was talking about that, and that I think that sort of combination of pressure at the contest, swarming in numbers and getting it forward, that will help us with our accuracy. It's worth noting, Melksham's our most accurate kick for goal. Fritter's our most accurate kick for goal, so we want them in the side. It hurt yesterday not having JVR for the whole match, because he's a pretty good kick. He's an excellent kick for goal, good technique, as we've talked about a lot. So we definitely missed him. Turner, the turn and kick it around the body from 25, 30 metres out. Call me crazy, but good luck if it works. But
I think he nearly missed it as well.
It's a drop punt from straight in front. He's a pretty good kick too. And Petty, is a pretty accurate kick, and he's not up there, although he wasn't last year. So, to be honest, I don't think there's much likelihood of it improving, because, any improvement's really tiny. They're not suddenly going to, for any number, let's say if they just spend all their time kicking for goal, we're still not going to be that more accurate. And as I've talked about ad infinitum, if any pressure, weather, any external variable that makes the job of kicking goals more difficult, poor technique will be exacerbated. And it's why that it's such a myth about wet weather football bringing teams together. It does the opposite, because the better kick you are, the better teams are able, better kicking sides are better able to deal with the poor weather or the wet ball, or because their technique's good. And you just got to look at Track. Track is one of the best footballers I have ever seen play footy. He has still got that same technical flaw in his kicking that he's had all his career. And I mean, they can do all sorts of work with their run-ups and, but if they talk about 10,000 hours to get elite at something. They've spent 10,000 hours kicking the footy and not been elite. Well, they've got to spend another 10,000 hours to get it to elite level, which is why pro golfers spend their whole careers often tinkering with things. And once they tinker too much, they can't get it back. Same deal. So, I'm afraid that until we get the better players flowing through the team through the draft and we target those better players, it's going to continue to be a problem. I will note, if I was going to pick a player in the AFL, no joke, to kick a goal for my life outside 50, I would pick Max. He is unbelievable. That didn't look like a goal.
I don't think it was. I really don't think it was.
It looked like a point.
Yeah.
It's like I was about to ready, but he thumps it from outside 50, doesn't he?
There was an interesting thread on Demonland today, talking about kicking for goal, and one of the posters noted, do you ever see teams trained to kick from 15 metres out directly in front? When you go to training, you always see them practicing from the boundary line, around the corners, in a pack, and all these sort of scenarios. But do you ever see them actually practice the easy shots? And I think that really highlights what Binman's been saying, that you've got to practice these things, but you've got to practice it under the pressure of game. So it was just an interesting point that I thought they raised.
It's funny you should say that, George, because I mentioned last week I met a fella at the North Melbourne D's practice game who was a statistician for the D's under Barras. And he said one of the big things that Barassi did when he came to Melbourne, he said that, like any Melbourne fan knows this, but we just didn't have the cattle. We had we had a very average list. And he said one of the things that that Barassi really changed was the culture of how to practice. And I went to a couple of back in when he was coach. It was great. We trained on the MCG, so watch training was at the G. I loved it. And he was talking about the drill that Barassi did, which I've seen a lot, which is starting off really close, like 10 metres away, and kicking to each other and not getting it, not moving until everyone got their kicks right, and then progressively going back further and further apart. I know they do a little bit of that now, but it was really interesting in sort of what you're saying about 15 metres close. Is it's that technique. It's like you start that way because you don't move until you got your technique, and that technique will be the same from 40 metres as it will from 15 metres. So I thought that was interesting, and talking about how Barassi improved our skills.
You talk about 10,000 hours. I think, B-Man, you're going to be an expert at podcasting, because we've done 10,000 hours by now, haven't we? We've just got one.
Well, I'm going to have to do my gag again with music. I didn't even get the timing right on it. So I was trying to get over your worry about having to pay some exorbitant fee for an Italian dub version of Good, the Bad and the Ugly. But so trying to get around it with a phone ring. I was giving you a legal out there.
Yes. Well, we've got another voicemail. We've talked about this from Roaster. He's messaged a lot of times. He talked about all the issues that we talked about tonight. So I'm just going to play his voicemail because he did take the time to message us. So here you go, Roaster.
G'day, boys. Roadstar here, and happy 2025, and great to hear you back on the potty. And, yeah, it was interesting last night, wasn't it? It was a strange old game, very scrappy, which I guess you expect for a pre-season match, and good to see the boys out there, good to see Track back and all the guys that had all these off-field supposed issues. They look primed and fit and ready to go. Was a bit worried for Gawn there, keep getting punished, and wondering why, whether it was his choice or whatever, why he didn't come off. But looks like he'll be good to go, as is JVR. Looks like he'll be good to go after that really early back injury. But there were some good signs of the game, which I think the way we ran it out was pretty impressive. Really ran over the top of them, although we just couldn't kick straight, which has been a real sort of thorn in our side for many years. And let's hope that was just the scratchiness of the Pracky match. Cozzy's comeback in the fourth was just incredible. So it's going to be really exciting when he comes back in round 4 and, shows us what he can do. And I love the way Greeny's actually played hardball and not letting him go, or, putting him on notice that it's not going to be easy if he wants to leave, which I think is good. Young boys did some really good stuff. Xavier Lindsay was, bit off a really good kick into the forward line. I think it was to Rivers or Sparrow in the forward line. I think they missed, but good to see the polish that they had. So, boys, I'm really G'd up for another big year. And, we'll chat to you soon. Thanks, boys.
Thanks for that, Roaster. If you want to listen to what we said about all of those topics you talked about, rewind to the start of the show. I think you covered everything that we talked about.
I was very impressed how he summed the whole show up in 2 minutes.
Yeah,
There you go, big man. Let's get Roadstar in instead of big man.
That's what I need to do. That's my goal, is to
2 minutes.
hit all my points like that.
That was 2 minutes.
Bang, that was it. The whole show.
There you go.
30 seconds.
In Roadstar, out bin man. That's my tip. Round 1. Lock it in.
Oh no.
Boys, I think we're going to leave it there for tonight. We'll be back next week. We haven't discussed this yet between us, but for 2025 season preview show, hopefully. I was keen to get back into podcasting after we won the week before, but now that I want to crawl back in a hole and emerge once winter has passed. That MFCSS is back, boys. If you want to listen to the show live as it happens, then head on over to demonland.com on Monday nights at 7:30 p.m. Thank you to our 5-star reviewers on Apple Podcasts. That was a thank you to Ocean Grove and Gone But Not Begotten. Thank you to our voicemailers, Noah and Roaster. As always, your questions and comments form an integral part of the show. So thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments. Thank you to Pingu, Monocular, Radish D, GS 1905, Smurf, Bigfoot, Lazy, Swooper Northy, Newport 34, Master Chief, Radelaide, Singer, Lefty, D-Minion, Scroll, Red Jacket, Horny Fagorny, and Mandalorian. And thank you to my co-hosts, George and Binman. And thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Don't forget, leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts. We'll read it out and give you that shout out on the next show. Go Demons.
Go Red Leggers.